Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Work-Based Learning Data Population Training. My name is Sulaiman Ahmed. I'm one of the field support specialists here at Figma CSIS, and today here at CSIS, or virtually, we have Martha Friedrich, who is the Director of Client Services, and we also have Marshall Isbell, who is helping with the technical side of this webinar. And then we have the CD folks, and we'll start with Brandy, and I'll let you introduce yourself and the other folks that are with you.
Sure. My name is Brandy Howdigi. I'm an information technology specialist in the CalPads operations office. And so the folks that are on the CalPads end of things are probably relatively familiar with me. But for those of you from the CTE world, hello. And thank you for giving up a vacation day to attend our amazing webinar. It's going to be amazing. And with me, we've got the queen of CTE. I will let her introduce herself.
Good morning, everybody. Michelle McIntosh with the California Department of Education. I am the administrator for the CTE Leadership Office. So everything work-based learning, CTE is in my wheelhouse. So good morning.
And we do also have with us, although she's going to be a silent partner this morning, Jenny Singh from the Accountability Office is also here just to kind of gauge some of your questions. And then if you have any specific questions about the Career and College Readiness Indicator, she is available to answer those. And then also from the CalPads Operations Office, we have Paula Mishima. Paula, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was going to introduce myself. I'm Paula Mishima with the Educational Data Management Division. I'm just here to chime in if needed.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. So I guess we'll get started. I'm going to turn off my video because sometimes it becomes distracting a bit. All right. So again, welcome to the Work-Based Learning Data Population Training this morning. Today, we will introduce you to this new CalPads file type. We will look at the methods of submission, functionality, data details, and provide you with some important reminders and resources towards the end of the training. All right, the objective of this training is to familiarize the CTE coordinators with the data collection and their responsibility. Additionally, we will explain the system requirements so CalPads data coordinators can implement processes to meet the data population requirements in preparation for the EOI submission. Here's the agenda for our training this morning. We will discuss the following. So we will start with an overview of the work-based learning and the details about the submission. And then we will discuss the submission process and methods and look at the data in detail, examine the field specifications and valid codes. And lastly, we'll wrap up the session with a summary along with some reminders and resources towards the end of this session. So let's begin with the overview, where we will provide some general information about the work-based learning, then introduce key concepts and the purpose for this CalPads data submission. And I will let Brandy take over, and she will go over this next section with Brandy.
Great. Okay, so what exactly is work-based learning? So work-based learning is an education strategy that links classroom instruction to work-related experiences, aims to increase students' technical skills and knowledge, and helps shape career decision-making. Work-based learning is offered on campuses or in community locations, includes exploration, simulations, student-led enterprise, service learning, community classroom, or cooperative education, internships, and apprenticeships. So we at the department, and specifically an accountability subgroup, took a look at all of these types of programs that may exist in districts and formed a committee to determine what was necessary to actually collect in CalPads. So the primary purpose of the collection of these data is to enhance the career components in the CCI, the Career College Indicator in the California School Dashboard. That is the primary reason that we are collecting these. So those of you that have been and familiarized yourself with the dashboard know that it is very, very heavy in terms of the college components. And the accountability subcommittees thought it was necessary to sort of beef up, and the State Board of Education particularly thought it was necessary to beef up the career components. And so this is our attempt to do that. All right, so what we want to talk right now about is some of the current career-related CCI measures that are currently being captured and will be used in the Career and College Readiness Indicator. So the first is one that's been around a really, really long time. This is Career Technical Education Pathway Completion. In order to be identified as, and again, this is only one measure that could potentially lead to preparedness for a student, but the student has to finish a pathway consisting of a minimum of 300 hours. Okay, the capstone course that the student passes, they must pass that capstone course with a C- or better, and it has to be in the same industry sector as the pathway. So all of the courses have to be within the same pathway. The capstone that they pass has to also be within the same pathway. And so for those of you that are in the on the CTE side of things, what you need to understand is the way we determine whether or not a course and a capstone is in the same pathway is based on the course code that you choose, both in your student information system and ultimately that gets reported to CalPADS. Okay, so to be prepared in the Career College Indicator, the student must complete a CTE pathway with a C- or better in the capstone, plus an additional measure. Okay, that additional measure could be scoring level 3 or higher on the ELA or math smarter balance assessments, that they completed their A to G requirements with C- or better, or that they took 1 semester, 2 quarters, or 2 trimesters of college credit courses. So not only being a CTE completer gets you there, you actually have to meet some additional measures. Approaching prepared is another metric that they use in the dashboard. Is that the student actually just completed the pathway with a C- or better in the capstone course. Okay, so it doesn't get the student to prepared, but it gets them to approaching prepared. Next slide, please. Okay, the next item that will be included in the dashboard is something that we've been collecting for a couple of years now, and this is pre-apprenticeships, and these are registered pre-apprenticeships. Last year, in CalPADS, this was actually collected in our student enrollment file, and it was just a yes/no indicator. Okay, these indicators and these work-based learning programs are also, I forgot to mention, collected for students in grades 9 through 12. So if they complete any of these programs within 9 through 12, the expectation is that LEAs will report that. And last year, again, this was a yes/no indicator in the student enrollment file. And if a student completed a pre-apprenticeship, and I will say that a lot of these definitions for what exactly these things are, we'll cover a little later in the presentation. So in the CCI, prepared is completion of this program that is recognized by business or industry and registered at the state or national level. So it provides entry-level skills necessary to be eligible to enter a registered apprenticeship program. Okay. Currently, there are no approaching prepared criteria. So if they completed one of these programs, you would, last year, you indicated that in CalPADS, and we'll talk about how that's changed a little bit for this year. Okay. We also capture information on non-registered pre-apprenticeships. So this program is recognized by business or industry, but it is not a state registered pre-apprenticeship. Okay, so it's essentially the same thing, but it's not registered at a state or national level. Okay, prepared. So for non-DAS schools, those of you that are in the CTE realm or even in CalPADS, DAS is Dashboard Alternative School Status. Okay, so for non-DAS schools, meaning traditional schools, they must also complete a CTE pathway to earn prepared. For alternative schools, they must also complete either 1 CTE pathway or 1 semester, 2 quarters, or 2 trimesters of a CTE course. Okay, approaching prepared, that includes completion of a non-registered pre-apprenticeship only. Okay, so that's the only thing that that student did. Next slide, please. And Jenny, if at any point you want to chime in, please feel free. State or federal job programs. So state or federal job programs include Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Job Corps, Youth Build, California Conservation Corps, regional occupational centers and programs. Last year, we actually collected these as one indicator. So did the student complete a state or federal job program? Yes or no? This collection actually was split out into its distinct categories for 2021, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if the student completed one of those programs in grades 9 through 12, and they completed at least one semester, 2 quarters or 2 trimesters of CTE courses with a C- or better, then they will be considered prepared in the Career College Readiness Indicator. Approaching prepared, obviously, is if they only complete the state or federal job program. Transition classroom-based work exploration and work experience. These are specific to students with disabilities. Last year was our first year of collection of these data for students with disabilities, and it was in our new SPED file, which is in a file that comes directly from your special education data systems. So for those of you that use CSIS, this information came from CSIS or CSIS or Welligent or Fawcett systems. Okay, so this comes from your special education data systems. And it was just an indication whether or not this student with disabilities participated and completed at least 4 semester courses anytime during grades 9 through 12 of either classroom-based work exploration, or they completed a minimum of 100 hours over the grades 9 through 12 of actual work experience in the workplace, and that could be paid or unpaid. Prepared, they have to complete both classroom-based work exploration and work-based experience, and approaching prepared is one or the other. So we are collecting some new work-based learning data, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and Slyman will kind of walk you through each of those categories distinctly. And those new items, specifically internships, student-led enterprise, virtual or simulated work-based learning, those are going to be analyzed for potential inclusion in the fall 2022 dashboard. That's really important. Before they decide, our accountability subcommittee decides whether or not to use any of these metrics in the dashboard, they actually have to take a look at the data to see how well you guys actually report these and whether or not they're meaningful indications of whether or not the student is prepared for career once they graduate. So some of the new components, again, are not going to be included in the fall 2021 dashboard, but will be included in the fall 2022 dashboard, potentially. So when do we collect this work-based learning data? So for this year, our work-based learning file will be part of the end of year 1 submission. So typically our end of year submissions run from May, and in this case, May 10th, 2021. And the initial certification deadline is July 30th. So those of you that are in the CT realm may be thinking like, what in the heck is an initial certification deadline? What you need to think of the initial certification deadline of July 30th as is a checkpoint, okay? We know that many of you are on summer break, and therefore having this initial checkpoint just ensures that you get your data submitted on time. Now, if any changes need to be made after July 30th, you still have the opportunity to do that. Okay, you have all the way up until August 27th, 2021 to finalize your data and certify it in CalPADS. Okay, but you won't actually start submitting these data into CalPADS until, again, the May 10th is when our snapshots start running. Okay, so you will be able to start submitting these data from your student information systems on or around May 10th.
So Brandy, can I clarify that though? We want you to be collecting this data and populating your SIS throughout the year. It's not going to be sent up to CalPADS until May 10th when we start processing the end of year submission. So
Yeah.
there was a difference there.
That is correct. Yeah, and I'm going to actually cover a lot of that when we start talking about roles and responsibilities. But she makes a good point. And that is one of the miscommunications frequently about CalPADS is folks think that they have to collect and submit the data all at once. And the reason we're providing this training to you right now is because the expectation is that you will start entering this information into your student information system right now, because these students are participating in these courses right at this very moment. So yeah, you're going to have to report all year round, but you don't actually start submitting the data to CalPADS until May.
So Brandy, this is Jenny. We're getting a lot of questions about where you find out if your program is registered. So I just wanted to let everyone know that registration is done through the Division of Apprenticeship Standards in the Department of Industry Relationships.
Great. Thanks, Jenny.
Is that in CDE?
No, it is not. It's
Okay.
a separate department.
Is it in EDD? We're going to have to find out, huh?
We'll have to find, it says Department of Industrial Relationships. So
Oh, okay.
I think it's a separate department.
Got it. All right, next slide. So what are the things that you need to do in order to prepare for this submission? And these are things that we went over in our CalPADS information meeting, but those of you that are in the CTE world may not have been on that meeting. But you need to review your current business processes for how you evaluate internships. There's information that we're collecting from you on performance evaluations for students that are participating in internships. You need to establish a process to collect student work hours, which we'll talk about in a second. And then CalPADS administrators, you need to make sure that any courses that include work-based learning content are mapped to the appropriate CalPADS state course codes, because that's also a piece of information we're collecting in this new file, but we'll go over it in detail in just a bit. So let's talk about roles and responsibilities. Okay, so many of you are CTE coordinators. Some of you may be CTE teachers. Some of you may be special education teachers and data coordinators. And then of course we have our CalPADS administrators. So each of you have a very, very distinct role in this process, and you all have different responsibilities. Okay, so CTE coordinators, what is your role in this process? Number one, it is your responsibility to identify if you actually run any of these programs at your districts and schools. Okay, so what we're talking about here is internships, community classroom, cooperative vocational education, work experience education. If you've got any of those programs in your districts, then very likely you would be able to submit work-based learning program data for your students. What's really important, again, is that you establish a local process on particularly for internships, because we're collecting a lot of information about internships. You have to come up with a standardized process for the employers to evaluate students that should align to the data collection requirements in CalPADS. You've also have to come up with a process for the collection of student logs for external hours spent on work-based learning. Okay, so if they're spending any time outside of the classroom on these projects, you actually have to collect the number of external hours from these students. So that process has to include all of these things. And then finally, you have to make sure that within that process, you are responsible and you review any of the reports that are required for certification of this work-based learning submission. Okay, you are the subject matter expert, CTE coordinators, and therefore you need to review those reports and ensure their validity before the CalPADS administrator or whoever your data certifier is in CalPADS hits that button and says, yes, my data are accurate and reliable. CTE teachers, you are on the front lines, and therefore it's important that you help identify courses that you may be teaching that contain work-based learning components. And specifically, we're talking about if any of your courses have virtual or simulated work-based learning components, any student-led enterprises, or if you have courses that students are taking at regional occupational centers or programs, you want to make sure that you identify those courses. Additionally, you're going to have to come up with, in conjunction with your CTE coordinators, you're going to be responsible for the collection of those external hours from students. So you have to come up with some sort of process where on a regular basis, you're collecting information directly from the students on how many hours they spend external to the classroom working on virtual or simulated work-based learning or student-led enterprise projects. Now, all of these staff also have to work in conjunction with the special education data staff, because as I said, there are 2 data elements that were work-based learning programs that we're collecting that are specific to students with disabilities. Now, let me be clear about something. All of these work-based learning programs can pertain to students with disabilities. Okay, if they're a student with disabilities and they're in an internship, of course, we want you to report it. But we also know that there are some students with disabilities that may participate in these specific programs, and that's the transition work-based experience and transition classroom-based work exploration. So you need to work with your special education staff to ensure the identification of these students who complete. Again, if for work experience, it's a minimum of 100 hours in grades 9 through 12. And then for classroom-based work exploration, it's the equivalent to 4 semesters of that classroom-based work exploration. If they've completed any of those things, you need to work with your special education data staff to get that information into the student information system. The special education staff would also have to review the data in that work-based learning report for students that have been identified as completing one of these work-based learning programs. So they also have a role in reviewing and helping certify the data. Next slide. And then finally, some of my favorite people in the world are CalPADS and Student Information System data coordinators. It is your responsibility to train key staff on data entry into the student information system. Where does this information sit within your SIS? Okay, the CTE coordinators, and it's sort of a joint effort in determining who actually populates that information in there, but it's really good for you to teach people how to fish. Okay, so if you want the data entered on a regular basis, teach the individuals that are most knowledgeable about those data on how to input them into the student information system. Also, make sure they are aware of any key reporting deadlines. As the data coordinator, it's your responsibility to try and ensure that all of these data get into CalPADS in a timely manner, that those reports are reviewed and certified in a timely manner. So just ensure that that's communicated and that calendar is clear to all of the stakeholders for work-based learning. Also, make sure that you work with the program staff to identify any of those courses that contain content for work-based learning, because we're also going to require that in the cases of student-led enterprise and virtual or simulated work-based learning, those have to be work-based learning components of a course that the student is taking. And so you actually have to identify that course. So it's important that you work with the CTE coordinators and CTE teachers to identify which courses contain those work-based learning components. Also, you're going to have to work with those program staff to sort of resolve any of those errors. You guys are very familiar with how to do that. And just make sure that everybody, all of the stakeholders, have reviewed those CalPADS certification reports and that you're able to certify on time.
And I might add, this is Martha, that it gets really, really tricky because the folks that you need sometimes to answer questions during the submission period may not be around. So you really have to plan and be very organized and have those working relationships and be confident you have all of the information in your SIS, so that when the submission comes around, they may be, gone, and that you're able to continue on.
Okay. So we are now, do we want to pause for questions?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
You may want to take a look at the Q&A.
Right. And a lot of these, I think, Michelle is probably going to have to answer.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, Brandy. So I've seen a couple already that I've just kind of run through. And so the first question, somebody asked if they're running community classroom, with the community classroom time cards and those the collection of the hours, would those work? And yes, you just want to make sure that those hours are then being from the time cards are then being reported in your student information system. So you have a collection of that. The next one was a very good question, and it was, can we use CTIG dollars? Let me see exactly how it was worded, but it was basically, can we use CTIG dollars to be able to add these components to their student information systems? And the answer there is yes, you can use CTIG dollars for that. It's specifically if it's related to CTE, as this is work-based learning, so you can use those dollars for that. And then I've just been kind of going through and
so there was a question, are work experience classes included in work-based learning?
Yes, they are. Good question. So yes, they are. And I think Earl is on this as well. So Earl could also type something. Oh, well, I guess we don't have chat anymore, but yes, in fact, you want to follow the guidelines for how you report those classes. Those are considered internships, and you guys are collecting hours and so forth on those as well. So please make sure you report that information too. Let's see. Work-based learning, I see one from work-based learning data is for all students, not just CTE students, correct? The answer is correct. Mostly we have CTE students mostly partaking in the work-based learning data, but other students can take part in it as well. Virtual Enterprise International be one of the programs considered for virtual work-based learning. So Virtual Enterprise is a proprietary program. It is a student. It's not a student. It's kind of a hybrid of a student-led enterprise, but also that virtual enterprise. So yes, you can count that. Let's see, just trying to scroll down. So Brandy, if anything pops out to you, let me know.
Yeah, I'm kind of going through. So one of the things that I just wanted to say is, so Slyman is actually going to take you through each of these work-based learning categories. He's going to tell you how we have actually defined it. And he's going to tell you exactly where you can find the documentation with all of these definitions, because that's one of the biggest questions that we get from our CTE partners is, where the heck do I find out what this means and what this includes and what it doesn't? And so our accountability folks actually took the time to work with their working group to come up with comprehensive definitions for each of these things. So we are going to cover that, just so you know.
I do see one regarding AP and IB courses regarding credentialing, and at this time, to teach a CTE, well, if you're teaching a CTE course to be considered highly qualified or to be considered high quality CTE, you would need to have an actual CTE credential for those courses.
Right. But it should be clarified. And one of the reasons there's a lot of confusion around this is because, and the reason we collect all CTE courses, whether or not they're being taught by a CTE credentialed teacher, and we're talking about the CTE pathway completion component right now. What's really important to remember is that a CTE course is a CTE course if it is a course that was developed with the Career Technical Education Standards. Okay, yes. That is a CTE course. Whether or not it's taught by an appropriately credentialed teacher is a separate issue. Okay, so the reason that we collect both is that for purposes of being identified as a CTE completer in the dashboard, the accountability subcommittee and the accountability group made a decision to include all CTE courses, whether or not they were high quality. Okay. However, for assignment monitoring purposes, they actually require that you have a CTE credential. If those courses are funded with Perkins or CTIG, they have to have a CTE credential teacher. So even courses that don't have CTE credential teachers, although they can count towards CTE completion for the dashboard, you may have other issues, right? If you don't have CTE credential teachers. But the one thing I will say is that it's really important that we get a good picture of how many teachers or where we're deficient in terms of getting CTE credential teachers to teach those courses. Okay, so don't be afraid to tell us that a course is not high quality because it doesn't have a CTE teacher, because we're never really going to get a sense of how many CTE teachers we actually need in the state if you don't tell us. And then it's no longer your problem. It then becomes the state's problem to kind of do something about it and offer alternative paths to getting those CTE credentials. So, okay, soapbox, I'm jumping off now. Okay.
Brandy, there was this question. It says we have an employer evaluation in place, but how do we know if it aligns with CalPAD's data collection criteria? And I noticed you kind of made that connection earlier in the slide. So is that something we'll get to later on?
Yeah, Simon is actually going to show you where exactly to find these definitions and the specific code set. So we have a code set. We have a standardized code set that outlines the specific criteria and the definition of each of those categories. And so it would behoove you at some point to take a look at those categories and align your evaluations to those. Okay, so Gina's asking, hi Gina, is there a CalPADS code number for CTE dual enrollment courses? Okay, Gina, that's a great question. So dual enrollment, which CTE dual enrollment means the student is actually taking a CTE course and they're earning college credit. There is no specific course code for CTE courses. Okay, so because what we want you to do in CalPADS, excuse me, we want you to use the CTE code that most aligns with that particular college level course. Okay, so if it's an advanced level auto mechanics course, we want you to choose the auto mechanics course, the advanced auto mechanics course from the CTE course code set. However, there's an additional piece of information that you're going to need to give us. And that is in a separate field, and it's called the course section instructional level code. The course section instructional level code, you have two options this year, 23 and 24. 23 is college credit only, meaning this student is receiving only college credit for this course, or 24, which is dual credit, which means the student is receiving high school and college credit for the course. So for CTE courses, you have to do both. You have to tell us the CTE course code, and then you also have to tell us that it's either college credit only or dual credit in a separate field. Okay, Sly, I think we can probably move on, and I'll try to answer some of these as we're going along.